5 Live Formula One.
The sun is setting in Qatar as the final sprint Saturday of the year arrives. Is Oscar Piastri on the brink of a fight back? Can Lando Norris continue his charge? And will Max Verstappen find a cure for his Friday woes? We've got 19 laps of flat-out racing to find out, with the first points of the weekend up for grabs. So we're expecting elbows out into turn one. Welcome to live coverage of the Qatar sprint from the Lusail International Circuit. It's myself, Harry Benjamin, up with you in commentary, and very pleased to say our eyes and ears down on the ground this weekend, and on a very busy grid is Jenny Gow, who we can say good evening to now.
Good evening, Harry. Yes, the floodlights are starting to shine down on this Lusail International Circuit, just about 20 minutes drive from Doha, the capital of Qatar. And it's quite blustery down on the start-finish straight, which is going to be a headwind for the drivers. And the first person that is going to take that headwind is Oscar Piastri. He's in pole position, and the swarm of media surrounding the two McLaren drivers, I can't tell you, it's epic. And there's a lot of tension, there's a lot of expectation as well this weekend. The championship won't be decided today, that's the important thing to remember, but it could be decided this weekend, and everyone is biting their nails of what's going to happen. Is it going to be this weekend? And certainly on the flight out, I spoke to so many people and they were like, please let it go down to the wire, and half of them were saying please let it be happen here, because they want to see a moment of history with either McLaren drivers or Max Verstappen fighting back.
Yeah, I mean, look, for the good of the story, don't it? We all want it to be decided when the checkered flag flies in Abu Dhabi in a week. But this is Formula One. It doesn't always play by the rules. Lando Norris still has a sizable advantage, 24 points at the top of the standings, ahead of Oscar Piastri and Max Verstappen, who are joint on points. As Jenny said, Lando Norris can't win the title today, but he can win it on Sunday if he outscores Piastri and Verstappen by 2 points. Former McLaren mechanic Mark Priestley is alongside me in the commentary box. I mean, Mark, Lando Norris has this advantage, but actually Oscar Piastri is the man that starts on sprint pole at a track that he's got fairly good form at.
Yeah, he has. He's very comfortable around here, traditionally so, and this weekend looks to be exactly the same. So all he can do is maximise what he can this weekend, and so far, the way he's got this off to the start is exactly that. Let's
head down to Jenny. I think she's with Gordon Ramsay.
I am. He's a friend of our show as well, and also I keep bumping into you on the grid. It's wonderful. How are you today? Good?
All good indeed, thank you. I'm so happy the rain has stopped, and most importantly, excuse me, hello mate.
He's just introducing himself to another friend.
Nice to see you. So, what a climax, and most importantly, it's coming down to the wire. There is no room for any error whatsoever, but I've got a feel for these guys. 13-hour time difference, 14-hour flights, and back in that car, 200 miles an hour.
Yeah, it's hard for them, but tell you what, who do you think is going to take it? Do you think it's going to go down to next week in Abu Dhabi, this weekend with Lando?
I think Oscar's going to do it on this. Max is going to work hard. I think it's all going to come down to next week, if I'm honest, because honestly, McLaren are fast today, super fast. It's theirs to lose.
There we go, you heard it here first. Thank you, Gordon. So Take care.
Thanks, Jenny. Speaking with the chef Gordon Ramsay there. I think referring not to rain in Qatar, but the rain that we had last week. He was also there in Las Vegas, and we had that deluge for qualifying, didn't we? But that's what Gordon Ramsay thinks is going to happen, Mark. And Piastri does have the advantage of track position, and with it makes it 3 Qatar sprint poles in a row. His teammate Lando Norris, well, he won't be directly alongside him, but he will still be behind him in third. What does Norris do? Does he take it easy, or does he show that aggression we saw in Vegas?
Well, it's going to be somewhere in the middle of that, I think. He can't be overly aggressive. He doesn't need to win this sprint. He's got to have the big picture in mind here. All he needs to do is not fall too far behind his teammates. He's got a sizable points advantage, let's not forget. So he can play the game sensibly. But what he shouldn't do is suddenly start doing things differently to the way that he's done them all season, because that's when you start to introduce errors, mistakes, little things that can cost you more dearly. So he's not too far from the front. He's not in the middle of the pack, but he has got a George Russell in the Mercedes right ahead of him, between the two McLarens, who literally has nothing to lose here, and I think could be a major player going down into turn one.
Let's head back down to the grid. Jenny.
I'm down here with Zach Brown. Looking over at your pole sitter, Oscar Piastri did a good job yesterday. He needed it, didn't he?
Did a great job. He's very happy. Car's quick. Both guys are quick. Lando didn't have a perfect qualifying. Otherwise, I think we'd have 2 papaya cars here on the front row. But I'll take 1 and 3. And great for Oscar. It's exactly what he needed going into the final couple races.
How do you manage this situation? It's been like this all season, but when it gets to the pointy end, it must be more intense than ever.
Actually, you don't really manage it. That's the way to manage it. You know, they know the rules, which everyone is well aware of. They've done a great job. They've raced each other hard. They've had a few incidents, which is what you'd expect, but nothing that caused any bruising, if you'd like. So they're free to race. They've been free to race, and let's see what happens.
And Max Verstappen starting a bit further back this weekend. Does that help you guys out just a little bit of comfort?
We've seen him win races from either further back. So maybe not his best qualifying, but he's very much in the game.
And just quickly, how are you approaching this sprint race? 19 laps around Losail?
Yeah, I mean, these sprint races are pretty straightforward. So it's about getting a good start and then settling in to make sure you're good on the tires with what, I think there's been some cuts overnight. So I want to take it easy on the tires. But I think it's a pretty straightforward race.
Okay, good luck.
Thank you.
Jenny Gow speaking to the CEO of McLaren, Zach Brown, there with his 2 drivers, Piastri on pole, Lando Norris in third. A bit of a clunky SQ3 for him yesterday. His lap compromised by the Williams of Alex Albon, ran out wide in the final lap as well, but both McLarens certainly quick. Mark, Zach mentioned there about Max Verstappen very much still in the game, despite, actually being out-qualified by his teammate Yuki Tsunoda, the first time he's been out-qualified by any teammate since Baku last year. He was unhappy though yesterday, wasn't he, Verstappen?
Yeah, all day. We're quite often hearing complaining on the radio on a Friday about the car, but that's often when you're sort of looking for feedback as a team, and he gives you that. They often have 2 practice sessions on a normal weekend, which allows the team to do an awful lot of work to change the car, to get it up to speed, and by the time the sessions really start to matter, we often see Red Bull and Max Verstappen back on the pace. Because it's a sprint weekend, we didn't have that luxury, and he wasn't able to get the car working, so the complaining continued through qualifying for this sprint, and 6th was as good as he could do. It was a messy lap, and yeah, as you say, very unusually, his teammate Tsunoda 1 place ahead of him on the grid.
Yeah, let's see though, Verstappen can march his way through. He is the most successful when it comes to sprints, more sprint wins at 13 than every other driver combined, but has a bit of overtaking to do. Zach Brown also mentioned there about tyres. Now, they have been the talk of the town really this weekend. We've got a 25 lap limit imposed by Pirelli across the weekend on every set of tyres due to the extreme conditions that Qatar brings on them. But let's bring in the BBC's F1 correspondent Andrew Benson, because overnight Pirelli have done a bit more investigation, and as you heard Zach Brown mention there, they've discovered some more deep cuts on the tyres. Andrew, what more can you tell us?
Well, yes, so the 25 lap limit, as you say, is because of the curbs. At Qatar, the drivers always run across them. They're very low, but they're also quite aggressive, so in the past there have been tyre failures here. So this is the second race in Qatar where they've had a mandatory tyre limit, a mandatory 2-stop. Yesterday, after sprint qualifying, Pirelli discovered that there were some extra cuts that they weren't expecting in the tyres. They think they've been caused by people who watched yesterday may have noticed drivers running wide out onto the gravel. The gravel's then getting pulled back onto the track. The gravel's quite sharp apparently here in Qatar, so there's an extra concern about the tyre longevity basically.
But with the 25 lap limit, not expecting any stops in the sprint. In fact, there are no mandatory pit stops anyway in a sprint race, but particularly this weekend, of course, a lot of scrutiny under that. It will be a 19 lap race. It's essentially a 100-kilometre dash to the flag from lap 1. So we'll be keeping an eye on that, as will all the teams up and down the grid. Let's go back up to the front, Mark, because you mentioned him. George Russell, that pesky Mercedes, has split the 2 McLarens and could throw a spanner into the title works here.
Yeah, I mean, he'll have a big smile on his face, won't he? Because, like I said earlier on, he doesn't have too much to lose here, really. And so he knows that the guys around him know that as well. Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri can't afford to take too many risks, because them losing points is a lot more costly than it would be for George Russell. So if you're in that position as a racing driver, you're likely to get your elbows out, you're likely to be a little bit bolder, a little bit braver into turn one, and he'll be looking to get himself out front. If he can get out front here, it's a very difficult circuit to overtake on. He can control the pace of this 19-lap sprint, and if he can do that, he's in a very good position to take the 8 points that comes with the win.
Absolutely. Turn one certainly invites a late lunge or two, a right-hander that greets you. The distance travelled from pole to the turn one braking zone is just over 370 metres, with pole on the left-hand side and being greeted as the grid by a packed-out grandstand. In fact, fairly packed out across this just over 5.4 kilometre circuit, 3.3 miles. The sun sets ever lower on the horizon. The sky turns dark with a pink and orange glow from the sun, but the floodlights really do illuminate this circuit, which really highlights how important it is to get into a rhythm early on here. Overtaking can be tricky. Lap one will be crucial, with just one DRS zone down the start-finish straight, which doesn't really give you that much of an advantage. I think George Russell yesterday was saying he was hoping that race control and the stewards might look at maybe extending the zone slightly.
Yeah, I think he's thinking more towards the Grand Prix. You know, the sprint is often a good place to test stuff like this. It's the earliest part of the weekend. We're going to get all cars on track together in sort of race conditions. So they'll be able to get some feedback from this, some data and some understanding. And let's hope, if it needs it, let's hope we can have some common sense applied for the race.
Another man to look out for in this sprint race, and hoping to bag some good points, because his team are currently fighting over 6th place in the Constructors' Championship, and that's really a four-way fight with 22 points separating Racing Bulls, Haas, Aston Martin and Sauber. But Andrew, it's Fernando Alonso in the Aston Martin who was blisteringly quick out of the blocks yesterday for Aston and lines up 4th.
Yeah, it's an extraordinary performance by him. I think the Aston Martin suits this track, but of course that should be contextualised in the basis that it's not a very good car. As Adrian Newey said, the track suits the car, but Fernando did the rest basically after they got it in the window. He's very good around Qatar. He put an Alpine on the podium here in 2021, which was an outstanding performance. This was another one.
Yeah, we'll see where Fernando Alonso can finish the 19 laps. A couple of minutes then until we get lights out. Worth talking, Mark, about Ferrari, and we have to say we're not mentioning them right at the top of the billing because, well, they're not at the top on the grid. Charles Leclerc, the best Ferrari, in 9th, but Lewis Hamilton, well, he qualified down in 18th. He'll start from the pit lane. It's another tough weekend for the 7-time world champion.
Yeah, so tough. And actually it was really sad to see Lewis and his demeanour after being knocked out in the early part. It wasn't just being knocked out, it was just he was struggling all the way through the session, could not get the car to work, which has been the story of a number of races, of course, in his short Ferrari career so far. So it's been a season to write off for Lewis. This is just another highlight of that. The team haven't been performing to the level they need to be. They want to be championship contenders, and it was only 12 months ago they genuinely were contenders for a title. They seem to have disappeared a long way backwards, with the guys at McLaren, Mercedes, Red Bull as well, of course, much further ahead. So they've got an awful lot of work to do, and they will hope that next year, when all of these technical regs changes, we get new cars and a new formula, essentially, they'll hope that will be an opportunity they can take advantage of.
Pirelli bringing the hardest tyres in the range this weekend, same compounds as we've seen in Qatar over the last couple of years. Looking like the medium tyre will be the one of choice, although just popping up on our timing screens, hard tyres also in action for the likes of Lando Norris and Fernando Alonso, which is curious. But Lewis Hamilton down in the pit lane in the medium. So I was about to say, could we see this being a bit of a test session maybe for the race ahead for those who are right at the back and starting from pit lane?
Yeah, and that's exactly what it is. You know, this is the biggest opportunity to learn ahead of the Grand Prix. As I said earlier on, you get the opportunity to reset your car, to take it out of parc ferme, to do some work, to change things like the setup and components. So everything you learn here, often we do this learning, of course, in the second practice session on a Friday. We didn't have that opportunity on a sprint weekend. So this is a real good opportunity to learn stuff about how your car performs over long stints in race conditions, which is very, very different, of course, to the way that you set it up for qualifying. So lots of learning, and we'll see who comes out of this on top and what they can then put into practice for tomorrow's race.
Let's not forget as well that most of the teams ran the hard tyre first in practice of the first session yesterday, so they've obviously got some good data from that running on that tyre.
Certainly will, as the tyre warmers are lifted off of Oscar Piastri's medium tyres on all four corners of the McLaren. He's given a little bit of a push back, try and lay down some rubber as he lays his foot down on the throttle for the formation lap, which will get underway shortly. We'll run you through the grid as they head round onto the circuit. I mean, Mark, what are your expectations for these 19 laps? Are we going to get some good overtaking, or will we see a bit of a stalemate develop?
I think it's going to settle very quickly into a status quo. The real highlight and the real opportunity for everybody is going down into turn one, and particularly on this opening lap, and that's what I'm really interested to see, particularly with the championship contenders, with George Russell in amongst them. Who's going to come out of that leading this sprint race?
Certainly is. As they get underway on this formation lap, it will be Oscar Piastri on sprint pole. George Russell in the Mercedes will lined up alongside him, with Lando Norris in third. Fernando Alonso starts fourth. Yuki Tsunoda in the top five. Max Verstappen with a little bit of work to do in sixth, ahead of Kimi Antonelli. Carlos Sainz goes from eighth spot ahead of Charles Leclerc in ninth. Then comes Alex Albon rounding out the top 10. It's Isaac Hadjar from 11th. Oliver Behrman in the Haas is 12th, ahead of Gabriel Bortoleto. Nico Hülkenberg, rude mistake on his final lap in SQ2 yesterday, starts 14th, ahead of Esteban Ocon in 15th. Liam Lawson from 16th on the grid, and we will then have from the pit lane Lance Stroll in the Aston Martin, Lewis Hamilton in the Ferrari, Pierre Gasly in the Alpine, and Franco Colapinto. So a busy pit lane with only 16 cars lining up on the grid.
Yeah, I'm actually really excited for this opening lap. I think this is going to be a real test and a real insight to what we might get tomorrow as well. So lots to keep an eye out. The graphics on our screens not quite correct in the tyres, because the top three all on the same medium tyre, which is not what the graphics currently saying, but that's probably what we'd expect.
Our timing screen is all over the shop. I think Jenny's got more clarification on the Pirelli tyres.
Yes, everyone is starting on the C2 medium tyre. Just a couple of them on the new one. That's Pierre Gasly, Franco Colapinto and Lewis Hamilton. Everyone else on a used set of those medium tyres. Watch out for cuts, watch out for punctures. This is going to be an aggressive 19 laps.
Thank you, Jenny. Another reason not to always trust the timing screen, isn't it? So everybody then on the medium tyre, that is what we expected to be, that optimum tyre. But let's see what can happen as the atmosphere builds, anticipation rises. The first bit of racing action of the weekend is just a few moments away. The sixth and final sprint of the season here in Qatar. Max Verstappen has the record amount of sprint wins at 13, more than every other driver combined, but he's got work to do starting down in sixth. He's behind his teammate Yuki Tsunoda, Mark. I don't think Tsunoda will make it particularly difficult for him to at least pick off one position.
I'd say by turn three, Max will be ahead. If he doesn't do it off the line, as you say, the team will very quickly move Tsunoda out of the way, so that's not going to be an issue for him.
No, certainly not. A reminder, we'll only have 16 cars on the grid, with Stroll, Hamilton, Gasly and Colapinto now all make their way into the pit lane. A flurry of colour of green, followed by red, and then two pink Alpines as the remainder of the grid line up. It's been a while for Oscar Piastri to wait at the front of the grid. 317 metres the rundown to the right-hander of turn one, which invites a late lunge or two. The last cars line up at the back of the pack. The green flag will fly, and we are about to get the first bit of action underway here on Sprint Saturday in Qatar. On the second row will be Fernando Alonso in the Aston Martin and Lando Norris in the McLaren. On the front row, it's George Russell in the Mercedes, Oscar Piastri in the McLaren. The sprint is on here in Qatar, and it's a good start from Oscar Piastri, who holds his line, moves over to the inside, then back to the racing line and takes turn 1 in the lead, as we've got the Red Bull sliding down the inside of Lando Norris's McLaren, trying to find a way through. It's Yuki Tsunoda who nearly goes toe-to-toe with his teammate Max Verstappen. Norris holds third. The top 3 as they were, with Max Verstappen and Tsunoda both making gains on Fernando Alonso, who drops positions from 4th.
Yeah, and Verstappen, as we predicted, now makes his way past Tsunoda, so Verstappen up into P4. No heroics from the top 3. I thought Russell was going to get a little bit more aggressive, nearly made contact with Lando Norris, had a really immediate jerk at the steering wheel to get himself out of the way there, but they all got through safely, and we are in the same position, certainly with the top 3. Now Verstappen up into P4, but the top 3 remain as they started.
Oscar Piastri doing what he needed to do as well. It was a nice start off the line for him. Had to cover a little bit to the inside, but had enough of purchase off the line to be able to take back the racing line and sweep into turn 1 without any challenge from George Russell. Then in second, Norris holds third with Verstappen 4th ahead of Yuki Tsunoda. Alonso's down to 6th ahead of Kimi Antonelli. Then comes Sainz. Hadjar's up to 9th with Alex Albon rounding out the top 10. Bortoletto's made gains up into 11th. One of the bigger losers is Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari. He's dropped down positions outside of the top 10. Both Ferraris looking at no points right now. A reminder, only the top 8 score points in a sprint as we start lap 2 of 19. Piastri starting to extend now over George Russell.
Yeah, so the positions remain as they are with the top 3, but as we know from what we saw yesterday, we've got a real difference in performance between Verstappen, who is now up behind Norris, and Norris himself in the McLaren. The McLaren working very, very well around this circuit. Yesterday, Verstappen's car, and bear in mind, they haven't been able to make changes to that overnight because it's been in Parc Fermé. Verstappen been struggling all the way through the Friday, so this is going to be a real interesting test. Although it's in a race situation rather than the shorter runs he did in practice and qualifying, this is going to be an interesting test of how that Red Bull is performing on this track on a different day.
Yeah, I mean, I know that Max Verstappen was complaining a lot yesterday, but I don't think the car was as bad as it looked. He was very quick in both Q1 and Q2 for the sprint qualifying. And then in the third session he went off on his first lap and damaged his floor, so I think he would have, even though he wasn't happy with the handling of his car, I think he would have qualified competitively if he hadn't done that.
And feeling more confident perhaps as well on the medium tyres, which they're all on now. 1.3 seconds though the gap. Piastri leads Russell over, but this is a crucial battle developing. A reminder, the championship cannot be won today. It will not be won in the sprint, but Lando Norris, if he can outscore Piastri and Verstappen by 2 points come the checkered flag on Sunday, will be a Formula 1 world champion. But right now he's having to look in his mirrors, because Max Verstappen with the aid of DRS, late lunge down the inside into turn 1, has a look, isn't close enough, but Verstappen with more confidence, a little bit more aggression, is starting to put pressure on the British driver ahead.
Yeah, and this is what we thought might happen, right? Because we know that Lando is the guy with most to lose. He's the guy at the top of the title. He's got that points advantage. He cannot afford to drop points, particularly to these guys around him who are right in the mix and now within reach of a world title. They could be the thorn in the side of Lando Norris, so he's got to be very careful, and Max knows that, and we know how aggressive Max can be. What a pain he can be to a driver that he's chasing down. So that little lunge we saw there, I think, is just a sign of what's to come. This is a tricky circuit to overtake on. It needs something wild if you are going to get past, and if anyone's going to do something wild in a situation like this, it's going to be Max Verstappen.
Lap 3 of 19 as the sky illuminates with a orange glow as the sun sets, and it's going from bad to worse for Charles Leclerc, who's lost another position to Ollie Behrman in the last lap. He's now down to 13th and compounds that with running wide into the gravel, kicks a load of it back onto the racetrack as well, manages to hold his car in a straight line but loses ground to Behrman ahead. He's got Liam Lawson behind him in 14th. The pit lane starters now have all caught up to the back of the pack as we head down to turn 1 once again, and crucially for Lando Norris, he is within DRS zone of George Russell ahead, and that's just maybe giving him that slight advantage over Max Verstappen, who did also open the rear wing of his Red Bull to get that drag reduction effect. But it's all even as we now head down towards the double right-hander of 4 and 5.
And Norris is just on the cusp of getting that DRS. Verstappen much closer to Norris than Norris is to Russell, so I think it's going to ebb and flow as to whether Norris keeps that DRS for every single lap. Interestingly, he had it that time. The position conditions remained as they were, but Lando ran a tiny little bit wide through turn 1, which allowed Max to gain even more time and get a little bit closer. So the gap from Norris to Russell pretty much bang on the 1 second mark. We'll have to see as he comes through the detection point later in the lap whether that's going to count as they get down that start-finish straight.
Yeah, that detection point is just before the final corner, so if you're within a second by that point, you get your DRS.
Yeah, bouncing's still very bad.
It's Max Verstappen saying the bouncing is still very bad. That's one thing he's been commenting on all weekend so far. As the car bounces, his head shakes up and down. Is that just costing him a bit of time? His teammate Tsunoda is holding firm behind him in 5th. Then comes Alonso in 6th. Antonelli is within a second of Alonso in 7th. Sainz, Hadjar and Albon make up the top 10. The top 8 are your point scorers as well, as we once again head down towards turn 1. Lap 5 of 19. Piastri leads 1.2 seconds he has over George Russell, but the closest fight right now is between 2 of our 3 title challengers, between Lando Norris and Max Verstappen over 3rd and 4th. Jenny.
Norris said yesterday it's almost impossible to overtake round here. His only option was really off the start line. Let's hope that Max Verstappen isn't able to perform the impossible, because this year he seems to be able to do everything that's impossible, including closing that gap to Norris and equaling Piastri in the standings.
Thanks, Jenny. We're just getting a look at the race restart, and it was very aggressive from Yuki Tsunoda, who slid his way between a McLaren and the Aston Martin of Alonso. Lovely stuff from the Japanese driver, and then it almost looked choreographed the way Verstappen suddenly appeared alongside him, and soon enough through went Verstappen. Good work from the 2 Red Bull drivers, and it nearly all went to pieces for Lando Norris in turn 1, Mark.
Yeah, very nearly Norris almost made contact with George Russell. It was a real reaction to avoid that, so that was very, very close. Tsunoda made the best start of anybody in the top 10 cars, I think. It's a real good launch off the line, and he did sort of open the door and allow that, dragged his teammate through, which was, I guess, part of the game plan if they needed it.
Well, for the man who is still trying to secure not only his Red Bull seat next year, his Formula One future, with an announcement expected by Red Bull next week before we get to Abu Dhabi. But Tsunoda, whilst a good performance will go some way, is it too little too late for the Japanese driver, with Hadjar, many suspecting the Frenchman, the rookie in that Racing Bulls, due for promotion next year alongside Max Verstappen, who is still stuck behind Lando Norris here and is around about the 7/10 of a second mark. Can't really get too much closer.
No, and it's one of the challenges around this circuit, but all the while he is that close, he will still get the DRS, and if he's close enough to do something a little bit wild, as we said earlier on, he's the man that's going to do that. The gaps at the front just starting to open out a little tiny bit, so Lando Norris now well over a second behind George Russell, so he's not getting the benefit of DRS down that start-finish straight, which just allows Verstappen to stay at least within range. And if he's in range, that means Norris has got him in his mirrors, he's got something to distract him, he feels a little bit of pressure, it could force a mistake, and that's exactly what Max needs to happen.
Well, Verstappen though himself just pushing a few moments ago out of turn 10, running wide and really aggressively hitting the curb. The bottom of the Red Bull bottoming out, sparking as he flew over the red and white rumble strips. Not good for the bottom of the car, not good for the tyres either, with deep cuts overnight across the field from suspected gravel that's been brought back up onto the track and the curbs as well. Pirelli, the tyre supplier, and all the teams up and down, hot on watching to see how the tyres perform. We have a 25 lap limit in place for all sets of tyres, so that makes the Grand Prix on Sunday effectively a mandatory 2-stop race, because that's 57 laps long. But in the sprint, it's only 19 laps. It's one tyre to the very end.
Yeah, and it's a circuit that bites you if you get it wrong. A very small mistake can really cost you. Here's Max.
Yeah, that gap was 0.8.
It's really bad. It's like really crackly.
Yeah, same as yours.
Radio problems for Max Verstappen and Jean-Pierre Lambiase, saying it's very crackly on both ends for driver and pit wall. Not exactly ideal when you're driving around at over 200 and over 320 kilometres an hour.
Yeah, I mean, in a sprint, I guess a tiny bit less of an issue, because you're not sort of having to worry too much around strategy, but there's a lot of communication that happens in a race, and the radio is a real clearly a very vital part of that. And if you haven't got clear communication, it really can compromise you. I've been in many situations when that's happened, and it's the most frustrating thing in the world. Just to go back quickly what I was saying about this circuit, it bites you with a very small mistake. Yesterday was littered with people going off circuit, searching for grip, finding the limit of that that grip, and as soon as you step over the limit, the tyres break traction, you slide off, and as Andrew said, curbs can cause damage to both tyres and the car. There are gravel traps, which are also nasty. A lot of things that can really hamper not just a lap, but an overall, a Grand Prix in the bigger picture as well. So I hope mistakes aren't the thing that decide this title, but it's going to be one of those that the guy who makes the fewest of them is probably going to come out this weekend best.
Lap 8 of 19 of the sprint, and Charles Leclerc is getting sick and tired of being stuck behind a Haas. He tries to have a look down the inside at turn 1, but can do nothing about Oliver Behrman in front of him and has to settle to remain in 13th spot. It's Oscar Piastri who leads George Russell by almost 1.5 seconds to Lando Norris in third. Max Verstappen has now lost DRS to Lando Norris in fourth. He's fallen over a second behind and constantly jumping, not only bouncing, he just makes reference to on the radio. So struggling out there in that Red Bull is the Dutchman. Tsunoda is the top 5 ahead of Alonso. Then it's Antonelli, who's still keeping Alonso honest. Sainz, Hadjar and Albon are the top 10. Bortoletto's 11th ahead of Behrman. Then comes the first Ferrari of Charles Leclerc down in 13th ahead of Lawson. Ocon is 15th, Hulkenberg is 16th, and the pit lane starters, well, they're as they started. Stroll 17th, Hamilton a second away from Stroll down in 18th with just the 2 Alpines bringing up the rear of the field. And we have got a bit of debris out on track. Something's fallen off Carlos Sainz's Williams, but it's bounced off the track. It's a hefty bit of carbon fibre, Mark.
I don't know if it's off the Williams or whether he's driven over it that was already on the track. So we haven't seen the incident of somebody having that damage. But as we said, the circuit's a punishing one. If you do run wide, it will rip bits off your car. These curbs are quite heavily serrated. And if you dip over into the gravel, as we saw a number of drivers do yesterday, it's a violent journey through some of those gravel traps at very high speed. So bits flying off the car are a consequence of the smallest possible mistake.
Well, let's see. Hopefully that bit of debris doesn't cause any tyre issues, but we'll keep an eye on it. No yellow flags out for that one. It's been cleared off the track by the Williams. Lap 9 of 19, Piastri leads 1.7 seconds. Let's check in with Jeddy Gao.
Yes, halfway through this race, and just to put the record straight, on this race, Max Verstappen was saying, I'm just trying to survive when it comes to riding out that car, the Red Bull not functioning as he would like to around this circuit. And if we look at the scores, if it was to end like this, it will be Norris leading the championship on 396 points, Piastri closing that to 22 points, and Verstappen dropping 1 point. 25 points would be the gap between him and Norris.
Thanks, Jenny. Crucial to keep an eye on those, even though the title will not be won in this sprint. It can be won by Lando Norris on Sunday if he outscores Piastri and Verstappen by 2 points across the weekend. So right now, though, Piastri doing everything he needs to do to give himself the fighting chance of staying in this title fight.
Yeah, he's not put a foot wrong, got it off the line well. He's controlling the race now, which is exactly what he needed to be able to do. The gap's opening out, so he's out of DRS threat from George Russell. It's settled into a bit of a status quo at the front end. Further back, Leclerc still desperate to get past Ollie Behrman's Haas and failing again. The 2 Ferraris, this is really highlighting how bad they are. Lewis Hamilton started from the pit lane ahead of just 2 Alpines. That's still where he is. Not in the pit lane, but just still ahead of 2 Alpines. He hasn't even been able to make inroads on Lance Stroll in the Aston Martin that we know is struggling. The 2 Haas's down there. Liam Lawson, who's had an awful weekend as well. Behind all of those people is still Lewis Hamilton, and Charles Leclerc stuck in a battle in amongst the kind of cars that we don't ever expect to see a Ferrari in. So this weekend is just unbelievably bad, and the opportunities that come from a race situation, albeit a sprint, they're not able to take advantage of at all.
Ferrari very much looking like they will go winless this season for the first time in a very long time, and right now not even looking at scoring any points. It's only a sprint race though, but every point counts. Ferrari are embroiled in a battle for second in the constructors, but they are rather the outside bet now because they're down in fourth. Coming into this weekend, they were 13 points adrift of Red Bull, who sit third, and with both cars looking to score points now in this sprint, looking stronger, but Mercedes have the stranglehold over second right now, coming into this race 40 points clear of their rivals. It does seem like the DRS could do with starting a little earlier.
Yeah, which is, as we said, that was something that's been raised, I think, by the drivers in a drivers' briefing meeting. George Russell certainly raised it in a press conference where he thought it was a good idea. Here he is. Oh, he's just saying that he's getting a little bit of degradation that he's starting to see on some of the other cars around him, which is what you'd expect. They're on medium tyres. Oh, a big moment for Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari there, running wide on the curve and a massive snap of oversteer. So that Ferrari is struggling in all sorts of ways today.
I'll tell you what, though, and that's put him right under pressure, because Liam Lawson decides to punish that one, but then gets completely driven off the track and into the gravel, rejoins in front of Charles Leclerc, but then Charles Leclerc drops back by quite a distance and into the clutches of Esteban Ocon and the other Haas almost. So race control might have a little look at that one, but it was rather clunky, and Lawson did have a face full of gravel delivered for him in that Racing Bulls.
It's a sign of Leclerc having to start getting desperate. They've got no performance in the car. He's having to do something crazy, and as Lawson rightly says, he's got to give me back the position. So yeah, that was a sort of wild move from Leclerc, but that's a sign of the times. That is a sign of the performance levels they've got at Ferrari right now. They can't drive the car to gain performance in the way they'd like to. They're having to resort to kind of big lunges, big crazy moves, and that's not where Ferrari need to be.
Well, Lawson's been told to give back the position, and he does duly make way for Charles Leclerc into turn 1 as Leclerc gets back up into 13th.
Yeah, what happened there, Leclerc was leading Lawson, he went off, and then Lawson went off with him and passed him while he was off track, so there's no way Lawson was ever going to keep that position.
I thought it was quite impressive though with Lawson. He went off track, but it was gravel that he had to drive through to get back onto the circuit. But in the end, it's over 13th and 14th with roles now reversed, and it all happened for Charles Leclerc losing the car on the exit of turn 5, which was the invitation that Liam Lawson needed to get down the outside coming through turn 6, and then was shoved off by Charles Leclerc, and then Lawson rejoined in front of Leclerc, but now has given back the position. Oscar Piastri still leads this sprint, the final sprint of the season, slightly extends his gap to George Russell in the Mercedes, who's sitting in second, 2 seconds back from the Australian. Lando Norris is holding on to third. Verstappen's dropped pace on Norris now, down in 4th. Tsunoda is 5th, Alonso 6th, and we've got a car off in the background as well. It's the Aston Martin, was it, of Fernando Alonso, and that puts him under pressure from Kimi Antonelli, who's been right there all race long. Finally gets the invitation with the aid of DRS, moves to the inside, hits the brakes for the right-hander at turn 1, and Antonelli makes it through and up into 6th, punishing Alonso for an uncharacteristic mistake.
Yeah, and I think that's our first overtake of the race, is it not? Certainly the most
one that's not been had to be given back.
Exactly, yeah, that's a sign of this particular circuit. So yeah, here's the replay. Alonso runs very, very wide at the final corner, dips 2 wheels into the gravel trap. That means he's compromised all the way down that long start-finish straight, and Antonelli was not going to look that little gift in the mouth. And Judy, with DRS enabling his move as well, sailed past him into turn 1.
Yuki Tsunoda was doing himself all sorts of favours, but has rather undone it slightly, because he's been flirting with track limits, and he's been given his final warning at turn 10, and as a result has received a 5-second time penalty. So for Tsunoda, who's about 2.5 seconds ahead of Kimi Antonelli, that will drop him positions, which is certainly not what the Japanese driver needs.
No, and the other consequence, going back to the Alonso thing, is he has brought a whole load of gravel onto the circuit at the exit of turn 1, which they've just noted in the steward's messages as well here from race control. So that's going to prove slightly tricky, because it's a very fast corner with a lot of debris on the circuit. Not that they're going to need to do anything to stop the race, but it's something that drivers need to be aware of.
Lap 14 of 19 of the Qatar sprint, Piastri leads Russell. Norris is 3rd, with Verstappen and Tsunoda the top 5, as we've got an Aston Martin coming into the pits. That was Lance Stroll from right at the back. He started from the pit lane anyway. Has he decided to call it quits early doors with maybe some kind of issue for the Aston Martin Lance Stroll, or are they going to try another set of tyres?
I think this is going to be a test session, is what this is. They're putting well,
let's head down to Jenny. You get a good view of that Lance Stroll pit stop.
Yes, it was a bit clunky, wasn't it? And it took a while for him to get released back out. When they put on the soft tyres, I was wondering if they were actually going to retire the car. But no, they put on the soft tyres. As you say, they're probably just having a bit of a test out there, just running those. But also the medium tyres, we don't know how capable they are of dealing with this racing, with the gravel, with the curbs. So let's see what they say afterwards. But yes, soft tyres fitted for Stroll, and he now circulates down at the back.
The pit stop was clunky because when they put the soft tyres on, he selected gear and dropped the clutch, so spun the rear wheels up whilst the car was still up on the jack, which meant the rear jackman couldn't lower the car down onto the floor, so they had to then pull in the clutch, take it out of gear, and then drop the car and go through the process again. So that wasn't in any way smooth, and that's a real sign of Stroll's weekend, summing it up, I guess.
Intense moment for the Aston Martin pit crew, but they deliver Stroll back out into this race on that soft tyre, the red-walled rubber, for a bit of a test towards the end of this session, with no points and no racing being done for Stroll, really, when he was 17th, just ahead of Hamilton. Stroll now drops to 20th and last. All 20 cars still running in this sprint. Piastri out front, just cruising. He's got the benefit of fresh air, able to manage his tyres as well. He's got George Russell at arm's length, over 2 seconds back. Norris is holding on to third, and this is kind of what Lando Norris said yesterday, wasn't it? If I can get George Russell off the line, that'll be good, but he kind of predicted he'd probably finish third because it's tricky to overtake.
Yeah, and so it's proving the only man that's really made any move is Antonelli. We saw him overtake Alonso on the circuit. He's going to gain another place when Tsunoda takes his 5-second penalty as well. So Antonelli's going to be the guy on the entire grid that probably moves the most positions in the right direction, at least. So good for him with his teammate George Russell up in P2. That's a reasonable little haul of points on a Saturday in a sprint for Mercedes.
Yeah, Jenny, news on Stroll?
Yes, I'd done my working out, and actually he'd used a set of medium tyres at the start of this race. They'd already done 7 laps, so as he approached team radio, I think Piastri.
Yeah, he's just saying, I'm getting a bit of vibration, Jenny.
There we go. So as he was approaching lap 15, he realised he was about to exceed the limits of the 25 laps that they can do in every session. So he had to come in and change onto a different tyre, so he didn't exceed the rules of 25 laps.
I mean, that's the most bizarre, horrendous, cock-up is what it is. I mean, why would you start a 19-lap race on tyres that you can't get to the end when there's no pit stops to be done? I can only assume...
Save yourself for Quali and Grand Prix?
Well, I can only assume that's some sort of oversight. There's no strategic advantage to that. I mean, he's now gone on to a set of softs. He had plenty of softs left because he got knocked out in the first part of qualifying, so he's not short of soft tyres. But that seems like a bizarre set of circumstances.
Yeah, interesting. He had 3 new sets of mediums and 1 used set of medium tyres, which one can assume that's what he started this sprint race on, so leaving him with still 3 sets. So perhaps either it's an oversight or some sort of strategic advantage, which we're not quite seeing at the moment. But as Oscar Piastri rounds the final corner and ticks over to lap 17 of 19 for the Qatar sprint, he leads by just under 2 seconds now. George Russell just starts to close a bit. Norris third, Verstappen fourth, Tsunoda fifth with a 5-second time penalty, which will be applied at the end of the session. He's been told to keep his head down. Kimi Antonelli is sixth ahead of Alonso. Sainz is 8th and last of the point scorers. Hadjar 9th, Albon the top 10. Then comes Bortoletto, Behrman in 12th, still ahead of Charles Leclerc, who is still ahead of Liam Lawson. Ocon is 15th ahead of Hulkenberg. Hamilton from the pit lane is 17th, along with the 2 Alpines behind, with Stroll having had that pit stop, stuck on the soft tyre, and actually just set the fastest lap as well, as you would expect, but he's 20th and last.
Yeah, and so we talked about, there being a lot of learning to come from this sprint, particularly around things like tyres and how your car's behaving and working. We heard Oscar Piastri talking about getting vibrations. That's 17 laps into a 19-lap race, probably a couple of laps to the grid as well. So when we talk about a 25-lap limit, these are the kind of bits of information that teams really need from today, carrying forward into tomorrow's full Grand Prix, because although the vibrations are fine right now, it's not going to stop his sprint race, and I'm sure he'll be absolutely fine getting to the end. Those are the kind of bits of feedback that become really valuable in how you decide to set the car up and how you potentially drive it in the perhaps even longer stints of a full Grand Prix tomorrow.
Penultimate lap just starting for Oscar Piastri then, who has so far led from start to finish. Kimi Antonelli, who at the moment is set to benefit from Yuki Tsunoda's 5-second time penalty. The Italian in the Mercedes is sick. At the moment, though, is on his last warning for track limits. One more discretion and he too will be dealt a 5-second time penalty, which will then give Alonso back those positions he lost initially.
Yeah, so his team will be all over him as Behrman runs very, very wide. That was turn 5 out into the gravel trap as well. So the circuit biting like it did yesterday, and for Antonelli and actually everyone who's getting close to those track limit violations, the teams will be on the radio just telling them to take it very steady. And what that does, of course, is when that's in your mind, you have to really think about it. We've seen it in other races as well. You start to compromise your lap time. We're on the final lap now. It's not going to be the penultimate lap. It's not going to be too much of an issue, but those are the kind of things that creep into drivers' minds when they're no longer focusing in the same way they should about ultimate performance.
The Alpines have just come in as well for stops from right at the back of the field. Alpine going from bad to worse this season, although Gasly has given them a little bit of a reprieve in the last couple of rounds by nicking a point here and there. So far in Qatar, it's been pretty miserable for the team that once stood on the podium here back in 2021 in the hands of Fernando Alonso. We start the final lap of this F1 sprint in Qatar, the last of the season. 6 of 6. We'll do it all again next year. And right now, it's Oscar Piastri who is on course to take his 3rd career sprint win. Curiously enough, all of them have taken place at Qatar too. Piastri 3.3 seconds clear of Russell. Norris 3rd. Verstappen, Tsunoda the top 5. Antonelli is in 6th. Here is Norris on the radio.
Lando, just be careful with this understeer not to run off track.
Careful with the understeer, not to run off track is the message given to Lando. Norris does not want to be pinged for any kind of track limits and lose out on any more points. Oscar Piastri looking set to gain a couple of points back in this title fight with just a few corners left to run. Outside of the top 6 comes Alonso. Sainz rounds out the top 8, and they are your point scorers. Hadjar is 9th, Albon the top 10, then it's Bortoletto, Behrman, Leclerc, Lawson, Ocon the top 15, Hulkenberg is 16th, Hamilton with a start to Saturday to forget in 17th, but with one final corner to run. Piastri fights back in this championship and takes the sprint win here in Qatar at the Lusail International Circuit, nearly 5 seconds ahead of George Russell's Mercedes. Lando Norris starts and finishes in 3rd, with Max Verstappen in 4th. Kimi Antonelli rounds out the top 5, but for Oscar Piastri, that is crucial in keeping his title hopes alive.
Yeah, Piastri did everything he could today. That's all he could do, was go out and win the sprint, and he's done it. For the others, it's been a bit of a damage limitation exercise. Lando Norris in 3rd, he'll be okay with that. He's still got a comfortable lead, and the big points, of course, are on offer tomorrow. For Max Verstappen, I think given how his car was behaving yesterday, he'll be not too disappointed to be able to hang on to 4th and take at least something from this particular sprint.
The gap now 22 points between Norris and Piastri. Norris, who holds on to the top of the championship. Piastri closing in by picking off a few points, and Max Verstappen with a race win away from the top of the championship.
Okay, that's the checkered flag. Very nicely done, Oscar.
Yep, nicely done, everyone. Yeah, car was good. Let's keep it going.
Let's keep it going, is what Oscar Piastri says. Sounding cool, calm and collected as he always has done this season, but he has really had a shocking run of form. 6 Grand Prix in a row not on the podium. This is his first victory in any sense of the word since the Dutch Grand Prix back in August.
Yeah, it's been a long time, hasn't it? And it will do him a whole world of good in terms of his confidence. I think there'll be a slightly different fight when it comes to Grand Prix qualifying. I think Lando was definitely on a similar pace, but was compromised in a number of different ways, partly by his own mistakes and partly by sort of bits of traffic on circuit. So I don't think we saw the best that Lando had to offer in qualifying, which would have put them much closer, I think, on the grid. But tomorrow's going to be a different story, and that is where the big points are on offer. And of course, as we know, he could still win the title tomorrow.
Nice work. Good drive today. Left you to do your thing.
Yep. Don't think that was a 1 or 2 more laps. That front left would have been in trouble. Yeah, good race, strong race.
Yeah, that's George Russell on the radio after finishing second. I mean, not much more I think he really had in the tank for that one, but that's crucial points for him and for the team as they continue to fight for second in the constructors.
Yeah, and another interesting little note there, isn't it, about tyres. I think it's a situation where he's talking about the front left wouldn't have done too many more laps. Well, tomorrow they may well have to do more laps with a full tank of fuel as well. So interesting information heading into the Grand Prix.
As the top three pull into Parc Fermé, 5-second time penalty for Kimi Antonelli. Track limits. He does get pinged, and that rather undoes Yuki Tsunoda's track limits penalty. So it's roles reversed. Tsunoda, who crossed the line in fifth, holds on to fifth, and Kimi Antonelli, who crossed the line in sixth, holds on to sixth. So it all evened out in the end. But for both of those drivers, pushing to the extremes then. But it's Oscar Piastri who climbs out of the cockpit of that McLaren. And what does this mean for tomorrow? Well, coming into this weekend, it was 2 points that Lando Norris had to outscore Piastri and Verstappen by. I suppose really for tomorrow it now just becomes Lando Norris has got to win it and Oscar Piastri has got to win it.
Exactly, which is, I guess, the case. It was always the case for both of them, really. That's what they wanted to go and do. They've both got the car capable of doing that. They've got a McLaren that's working very well around this racetrack. So if they put together a clean qualifying later on today and a clean race tomorrow, there's no reason why either of them couldn't win that Grand Prix. So I think we're in for a much closer prospect, particularly in qualifying later on today. And I think for the Grand Prix, I think it's going to be slightly closer with a little element of strategy involved that we didn't really get today either.
Piastri's first top three finish since the end of the European season was third back in Monza, and as I mentioned, that first victory in any sense of the word since August back at the Dutch Grand Prix. So it's a good bounce back so far for Oscar Piastri. George Russell, his third consecutive top three finish in sprints this season, and Lando Norris then coming home in third, has finished in the top three in all of the Qatar sprint races, but his lead in the championship now reduced to 22 points over his teammate Piastri. So this fight rumbles on, as we knew it always would, to Sunday at the very earliest, as we're just going to get another look at Kimi Antonelli and the undoing of his P5, which became P6 again after track limits, and he was given a 5-second time penalty.
And you know what? That was a silly one. It was track limits on the way into the corner. The drivers always try and maximise how wide they can get before they start to turn in. It makes the corner faster. He stepped over the line on entry to the corner. It wasn't even running wide on exit, which is normally where this stuff happens. So with someone who was on their final warning, and I'm sure the team would have relayed that information, that's a really silly error to make.
As the drivers just stand outside the FIA garage, they had to work hard for that one. Hot out there too. Air temperature 24.4 degrees, track temperature 30.4 degrees, humidity over 50%. As they all look rather done, if I'm honest. So
that's just a sprint.
Yeah, they're going to have to reset and go again in a couple of hours' time, because it's all focused now for the Grand Prix. We'll have qualifying for the Grand Prix coming up right here on 5 Sports Extra. We're going to be on 5 Sports Extra all weekend long. We'll have qualifying with the green light coming on at the end of the pit lane at 6 o'clock this evening. So do join us for that. But always nice to start the day with a bit of racing action, and crucially for Oscar Piastri, who gently peeled into his Parc Fermé spot, gave a wave to the fans as he sealed victory for the final sprint of the year, ahead of Russell and ahead of Lando Norris. And we can hear from them down in Parc Fermé, speaking to Jolyon Palmer.
Well, down here with the top three. First things first, welcome back, Oscar. What a weekend it's been for you so far, and that looked like a really controlled drive.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a good weekend so far. I think everything went smoothly in the sprint there. So happy with how it's been so far. Just need to keep it rolling.
What do you feel has changed for this weekend compared to the tricky ones you've been on the last few? Because from the first lap yesterday, you looked like you were right back in the zone.
It's obviously a very different circuit to where we have been. Much higher speed, much higher grip. But I mean, I think the last couple of weekends has just been things going wrong rather than a lack of pace, so to speak. So I think here everything's gone smoothly so far, and the pace has been strong. So it's a track I've enjoyed in the past. So I'm enjoying it again, clearly.
3 out of 3 sprint wins. Well done. George, playing detective, I saw at the end out of the car. We heard a little bit of chatter about your left front. How was the race for you? And obviously you spent a bit of time in the dirt here. How was the left front?
Yeah, I mean, it was a good race, good to get P2. We obviously know these guys are really quick, but those last 2 laps was a real struggle. This track's so quick. It's one of the most fun tracks to drive, and it's obviously brutal on the tyres and on the cars. So, yeah, glad to bring it home.
Talk me through the physicality around this place. Obviously the high-speed corners, especially that last sector. I imagine the necks of all of you guys are going to take a bit of working, but particularly for the Grand Prix tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, I was trying to rest it as much as I could, to be honest. It's pretty brutal. I mean, I don't know what the G-force is. It's like 5G for about, feels like forever around that triple right. But it's really cool. It's what it should be like everywhere, really. And, yeah, glad we got the chance to race around here.
Absolutely. And Lando, good points for you, up in the top 3 once again. I can't imagine you love seeing Max in your mirrors so close in the early laps, but you dealt with it very well. How was it?
I never saw him, actually. I just saw George ahead. So, yeah, I tried to go forwards. We got pretty close at the start, but it was good. No, I didn't see what happened behind. So, long stint, it felt like. A lot of pushing. So, like you said, it's going to be a tough race tomorrow. But, yeah, just not easy to pass around here. Too difficult. So all about qualifying.
He was having half looks down your inside into turn 1 on lap 2, but
never saw him.
Good to see you focused all the way in front then. Speaking of in front, qualifying, you said yesterday you thought there was a little bit more in there, didn't quite hook up the soft tyres. You got another chance later on. Feeling confident?
Yeah, I mean, George was almost on poles. He's showing that the Mercedes is quick and he's doing a very, very good job. So I think it'll be close. I don't think it's going to be an easy one. But, the team have also given us a very good car once again, as they always do this year. And it's been quick. It's a hell of a lap around here in qualifying. So I'm looking forward to it.
Great. And Oscar, back to you. Lando saying the car's been great for you, but we know from the sprint to the Grand Prix, things can change. You've been so good so far. Do you stick with where you're at, or do you have to keep moving forward to find more pace for qualifying?
Ideally, if we can find more pace, I think everyone slowly finds a little bit more through sprint weekend. So you got to try and get every bit out of the car that you can. But yeah, we'll try our best to do that. But I think our base performance seems very strong around here. So it's more just tuning rather than trying to reinvent the wheel.
All right, well done, guys, and good luck for qualifying later.
Your top 3 from the final sprint of the year. Oscar Piastri wins ahead of George Russell and Lando Norris. Norris now has 396 points. Piastri is second on 374. Verstappen with 371. So if Norris wins the Grand Prix on Sunday, he will be champion. Verstappen's got to finish ahead of Norris to stand any chance of keeping his championship alive. And doesn't that set us up nicely? A crucial qualifying to come later on. You can hear that on 5 Sports Extra. Will be on air at 5:55 ahead of the green light at the end of the pit lane. Coming on at 6 o'clock. My thanks to the whole team. But there's more live sport to come on 5 Sports Extra as we join 5 Live ahead of commentary of Sunderland v Bournemouth in the Premier League.
Pace from 3 o'clock in the Premier League then.